Does your CFI say that you look at the instruments too much? The FAA says that we should keep our attention outside 90% of the time and only look inside the airplane 10% of the time. But how can we keep our attention outside? Let's think how we drive our car. We keep our eyes outside so we don't hit anything, and we check our speedometer every once in a while. And we have learned to gauge our speed by looking at our outside environment. Now, let's get in the airplane. Here are 4 steps we can follow to fly by looking outside. First, we'll use the instruments to begin our maneuver. Then, we'll look at the outside environment sight picture, which is what we see outside the airplane. Then, we'll make sure not to deviate from the sight picture once we have correctly begun the maneuver. Then, we'll cross-check the instruments once in a while to double-check we're not deviating from our maneuver. This is the 10% of the time the FAA mentions. Let's put this into practice during level flight. First, we'll use the instruments to set up level flight and trim the airplane using the proper throttle setting. Then, we'll note the distance between the instrument panel and the horizon. As you can see in the FAA picture, this distance is marked by a yellow area. We'll measure the distance using a piece of paper or our fingers. Then, we'll commit this distance and sight picture to our memory. We'll know that if the distance changes, like if it gets shorter or longer, then we're no longer flying level. Finally, we'll cross-reference our instruments inside the plane every once in a while to double-check our level flight performance. Now, let's think about climb and descents. Again, we'll start the maneuver by referring to our instruments to get the right airplane performance under the right throttle setting. Next, we'll check the distance between the instrument panel and the horizon using paper or our fingers. For climbs, the distance should be shorter than what we saw for level flight, and for descents, it should be longer. We'll commit this distance and sight picture to memory, and we'll know if our performance changes when that distance changes. And finally, we'll check our instruments to double-check our performance. Now, let's talk about flying straight. The FAA says that our wingtips will be equal distance from the horizon when we're flying straight. In the picture, we can see that the high wing's left and right wingtips are equal distance to the horizon. When we're looking outside for traffic, we can also check the position of our wingtips. And again, we can look inside at the instruments once in a while to double-check our performance. For level turns, we should be looking at the angle that the instrument panel makes with the horizon. We'll begin the turn by looking at the instruments like the attitude indicator. Then, we'll look at the outside angle between the instrument panel and the horizon and make a note of that sight picture angle. We know that if the sight picture angle changes, then our bank angle changes. And again, we'll check our instruments to double-check our performance. Let's summarize what we learned about flying visually. We start the maneuver with our instruments. Then, we look at the sight picture outside. For pitch, we'll look at the distance between the instrument panel and horizon, and for roll, we'll look at the wingtips in relation to the horizon or the angle between the instrument panel and the horizon. We'll take a mental image snapshot of this sight picture and fly according to it. Then, we'll check our instruments to double-check our performance.